Let's bring in Liberal Senator for New South Wales now, Jim Molan. Jim, good to talk to you again. First up, would you agree with the thrust of what Anthony Albanese and Penny Wong have been doing on foreign policy so far, both in Tokyo and also today when it comes to the Pacific?
Chris, I certainly do. I just want to see the results. And I think AUKUS and Quad are good, and I think Quad will move on at a glacial pace going into the future, but it's critically important for us, and it was exactly the right thing for Prime Minister Albanese to do, to go to Tokyo and to do what he did in the Quad meeting. I think that it was exactly the right thing for a new government to do, to send Penny Wong into Fiji because the Pacific Forum is going to be the key. The Federated States of Micronesia were not at all impressed by what has been leaked. So I don't think this is a laid-down misere that we are going to see all of the 12 countries which are targeted. But I want to see the results, Chris. And we've looked at the South China Sea, we've looked at the Philippines, the small islands off the coast of the Philippines. We've seen China, who says one thing and gives assurances in relation to that one thing, and then does exactly the opposite. The greatest example of that is the militarisation of the South China Sea islands. So I think we are into a new phase of national security, and we had better be prepared. And I feel much more comfortable with the people I know. That is our national security team. That's natural, I guess, and the country will be as well. These people now have got to prove themselves.
Yeah, look, it's too early to judge their results, but I think you've got to be upfront and straightforward here, and that what Penny Wong and Anthony Albanese have been saying and doing in the early days has been spot on. And I think it's probably good for them and for their incoming government that they've been confronted with these issues right in the early days of their prime ministership. They've had to put aside sort of domestic politics, and especially in those briefings in Tokyo, they would have been confronted with the serious challenges that this country faces in the region.
Well, the longer that they can put aside the domestic challenges that face them, the better, because I believe that the domestic areas is where it's going to be shown that this new Labor and possibly Labor Greens government is going to fail, is in delivering what they claimed, particularly on things such as climate change, such as the economy. We've seen backing off already, and I guess that's every government does that. Yeah, we opened the books and the books were terrible, and I do not agree that Prime Minister Albanese is correct in what did he say, that we should show more respect. I don't think that the Labor Party showed any respect at all to Prime Minister Morrison, to the then Prime Minister Morrison, and the attacks on his on his character.
No. We've probably never seen a worse character assassination than what was vented against Scott Morrison in recent years. But Anthony Albanese says there's going to be a new side. Well, we'll see. Tanya Plibersek didn't get it off to a flying start. Now, the one area of the diplomacy from Penny Wong and Anthony Albanese that I would criticise now, I understand it, but I tell you what, it worries me deeply, is the emphasis they put on climate change. Here's Anthony Albanese speaking in Tokyo.
My government will take ambitious action on climate change and increase our support to partners in the region as they work to address it, including with new finance. We will act in recognition that climate change is the main economic and security challenge for the island countries of the Pacific. Under my government, Australia will set a new target to reduce emissions by 43% by 2030, putting us on track for net zero by 2050.
Now, look, I understand why he says that. It's all sorts of platitudes and virtue signalling, and it's smart diplomacy because the Pacific Islands want to hear that. But we've got to be upfront about this. There is no existential threat to the Pacific Islands from climate change. They're using this as a political leverage to get more aid out of Australia. Now, we should give them more aid and help them in other ways, not pretend, though, that it's all about climate change.
Absolutely correct, and I totally agree with that. Some of the Pacific Islands, in fact, have a much greater problem with overpopulation. Much of the data that's coming in shows that the agricultural practices in some areas of the South Pacific are what's causing the salinisation of soil. So this is not a simple problem. But of course, they're going to have a hack at us. Chris, you are quite right. They'll say climate change, climate change, climate change. Please give us money.
Yeah, but the point is, Jim, that we shouldn't accept that ruse, because we know that the big problems for Pacific Island countries is getting their young people educated, creating job opportunities for their young people, health services for their women and children. This is what they need to do. And the climate change argument is so nonsensical because they're cozying up to China, the greatest greenhouse gas emitter on the planet, where their emissions are still growing.
Absolutely, and climate change has so many illogicalities to it. But probably the biggest one is what we're seeing in the South Pacific, where India and China are producing 44% of the Earth's emissions. And regardless of what we do or the South Pacific does, we're not going to make any impact on the world climate. So You're quite right. But at some stage, Penny Wong has got to deliver something, and that's where she's going to find great problems.
Well, let's wish her all the best, but we'll keep a sceptical eye out. Just speaking of Scott Morrison, he's spoken for the first time in an interview since election night to Ray Hadley on 2GB. Let's have a listen to some of that.
It was incredibly tough, and I can understand that after all of that, as Barnaby said to me the other day, sometimes people like to change the curtains because they just like to change the curtains. Of course, I'm disappointed by the result, very disappointed for colleagues who won't be coming back to the parliament. And there are many issues there, but I know the new leadership of the party will, get around that, and the party will come together.
Just a final word from you then, Jim, on Scott Morrison and what you expect to see from him in the future.
Well, this is the kind of man he is. He's not going to go out and blame others. He's not going to interfere in the way that Malcolm Turnbull interferes. So I think that this just shows what an enormous lie it was to attack him on character issues. And that's the kind of man that he will be. I'm sure he will take a rest. He and Jenny deserve a significant rest. I think he'll take a rest, and then I'm very interested to see what kind of a contribution to this nation he can make. I am on the record as saying that I would consider that should we ever need a war leader, then Scott Morrison is probably as good, if not better, than anyone we could have as a wartime leader. But I think we've missed that chance now. Well, let's hope we don't need a war leader. That's more to the point anyway. Thanks for joining us, Jim. I appreciate your time. Thanks, Chris.